This is the Ramana Maharshi Self-Knowledge Satsang, a time for self-reflection and self-inquiry. Know yourself and be always free and at peace. Welcome. I'm Richard Clarke, hosting this satsang. I'm a seeker like you, sharing what we love. I've been blessed with years of deep teaching, and I bring this to you with this satsang. The background image today is Ramana's birth home in Tiruchuli, near Madurai in Tamil Nadu, South India. He was given the name Venkataraman when he was born. He was the second of 4 children in an Orthodox Hindu Brahmin family. His father was Sundaram Iyer and his mother Agagamal. He had 2 brothers, Nagaswami and Nagasundaram, along with a younger sister, Alamalu. Venkataraman's father was a court pleader, like a lawyer. And he lived here until he was 11. His father then sent him to live with an uncle in Dindigul, where English was taught. He wanted his son to be qualified for a government job, and English was needed for that. Now, we have more pictures. Let me get to them. These are of Ramana's birthplace in Tiruchuli. These are pictures that Carol and I took on a trip there in 2008. First is a street view, the street on which Ramana lived, and then his house. This is maintained now by Ramanashram. In his house, this is his birth room, where it has been made into a small shrine. Carol and I found that this was a great place to meditate. This was Carol standing on the roof of the house, and I took this photo to show that the house really was a fairly big house, and I think it means that Ramana was from a moderately prosperous family. And it was right across the street from the big temple in town, and you can tell here by the fence that it's a temple that you're entering because of the vertical red and white stripes. Those mark temples in Tamil Nadu. And then this is the temple entrance hall. This temple is Bhumaneshwara temple, and the primary god is Bhumanatha, who is seen as the Lord of the earth and a form of Shiva. This area also was Ramana's playground. In India, they don't have parks, and these temples are really the only public spaces. And it was right across from his home, so that's where Ramana and his friends played. This is the entrance into the temple, and the temple was really dark. It was not lit by electric lights. Here we just had the light coming in the window in back, and then the light from the ghee lamps that are lit around. Carol and I really like the atmosphere of this place without modern electric lights. Now, here's a story about Ramana and the temple. It's from a book, The Life of Ramana Maharshi. One day when Ramana Maharshi was 6 years old, he was taken to task for making kites and paper boats out of the case bundles of his father's. Ramana Maharshi was deeply hurt and disappeared. They couldn't find him anywhere. That evening, when the priest of Sahayavali, consort of Lord Bhumanatha, was about to perform puja, he found a boy seated silently behind the idol. It was Venkataraman. He was deeply hurt and seemed to have confided and sought solace with the goddess. In the temple, 2 walls are lined with these murtis, statues of different saints, including the 63 Shaivite Tamil saints, the Nayanars. The only book that Ramana read of any kind of a spiritual nature when he was a child was about the 63 Nayanmars. Next is a Murti, a statue of a goddess, nicely decorated for the day with fresh bananas in front. Here is a temple priest, and looking out from the temple at the temple tank. This was where, before you entered the temple, you would take a ritual bath. On to this week's reading from Who Am I? We're on paragraph 29, and these are Ramana's words. Firm and disciplined inherence in the Atman, without giving the least scope for the rise of any thought other than the deep contemplative thought of the self, constitutes self-surrender to the Supreme Lord. Let any burden be laid on him, he will bear it all. It is, in fact, the indefinable power of the Lord that ordains, sustains, and controls everything that happens. Why then should we worry, tormented by vexatious thoughts, saying, shall we act this way? No, that way. Instead of meekly but happily submitting to that power. Knowing that the train carries all the weight, why indeed should we, the passengers traveling in it, carry our small individual articles of luggage on our laps to our great discomfort, instead of putting them aside and sitting at perfect ease? Now, here Ramana is talking about surrender. You should note that when Ramana discusses surrender, the surrender he describes is complete. The seeker surrenders ego and the sense of mine, and focuses entirely upon the Supreme Lord, the Self. After this surrender, there is no such thing as letting ego drive the seeker's choices. The ego is surrendered and no longer plays a part. Ramana says this leads to, quote, firm and disciplined inherence in the Atman. Then the seeker is advised to treat individual cares, concerns, worries, and doubts like the luggage carried on the train. Why carry them yourself to your destination when the train carries them for you? Put them down. The train that carries the seeker takes the baggage too. This surrender is a giving up of the mine. Everything that happens is not the working of my will, but that of a higher power. Ramana would say, I have no sankalpa. Sankalpa means individual will or desires. This giving up of mine is equivalent to the discovery and inquiry that the ego never existed to begin with. Either approach demolishes the ego. Now, onto our videos for the week. First is Swami Sarva Priyananda, and here this is an excerpt from a talk he gave, The Way of Love.
One way of looking at spiritual life. There's a third way, which we shall take up today. That is the way of love, of faith, of surrender, of adoration. Here, the spiritual problem is looked at not as a question of ignorance and knowledge, not as a question of restlessness and concentration of mind. No. The spiritual problem is because we have no faith in God, because we do not surrender to God, that we do not love God. All our love is scattered in the world. That's why we suffer. So this is the path of love, the bhakti. It's just different ways of looking at it, but bhakti has some special advantages. And today we shall talk about bhakti. All of spiritual life in Vedanta, or in Hinduism in general, all of spiritual life comes from this source that we are in this world and we suffer, and hence we need to get out of this world of suffering. Buddha, for example, in Buddhism, the first noble truth is that there is suffering in the world. And therefore, is there a way out of suffering? And the Buddha says, yes, there is. It's something called nirvana. And is there a way to attain nirvana? He says, yes, there is. There's the eightfold path. So just like that, in bhakti also, why should we love God? Why should we have faith in God or surrender to God? The answer is the same. Because you have attained to this world of suffering. In the Gita it is said, Krishna says to Arjuna, Prapya imam asukham lokam bhajasva mam, which means, having attained this world of suffering, now that thou art in this world of suffering, worship the Lord thy God. So, because it's a world of suffering. But that's a common problem for all the paths. But in bhakti, the speciality is this, that this is the path which God loves. Everybody loves to be loved, and God loves to be loved. So, God has a special place in his heart or her heart, because in Hinduism you can have him or her or it. It can be male or female or beyond gender, with form or without form. God has been conceived of in many, many different ways in Hinduism. So love of God is something specially dear to God. One of the teachers of bhakti put it this way. Look, you who are on the path of meditation, you want to attain samadhi, the deepest absorption, meditative absorption, so that the truth is revealed that you are this immortal consciousness beyond body and mind. Is that right? I say yes. And then when you realize that, you are this immortal consciousness beyond body and mind through meditation, after that meditation has no use because you've already realized it. So the goal in meditation is not to meditate, but using meditation as a means to attain liberation. So when you attain liberation, you let go of the means. When you cross the river, you let go of the boat. You don't carry it along with you. Right? I'm saying, yeah, I guess so. And in the path of knowledge, this is some technicality here. In the path of knowledge, in Advaita Vedanta, non-dual Vedanta, they say that there comes some moment of intuition, a flash of enlightenment. In Sanskrit, it is called Brahmakara Vritti or Brahma Jnana, the flash of intuition which reveals to you that you are Brahman. That comes at a culmination of your philosophical inquiry into who am I. When that comes, you realize that you are Brahman. Now, there is a technical discussion there. Basically, what it says is, once you have got that, you don't have to hold on to that knowledge. I am Brahman, I am the absolute. No. Because you realize you are beyond the mind. So the knowledge which is in the mind is of no more consequence to you. Sri Ramakrishna, it's a complicated thing, but Sri Ramakrishna put it very simply. He said, you know what knowledge of God is like? You have a thorn in your flesh, and you take another thorn and pull out the first thorn. But you don't leave the second thorn in your flesh now. You throw both away. You have the thorn of ignorance, you take the thorn of knowledge, pull out the thorn of ignorance, and then you throw both away. So after the intuitive realization that you are Brahman, you don't need to hold on to the particular intuition which revealed to you that you are Brahman. Which means, to put it very simply, after knowledge is attained, that particular knowledge is of no use to you. You let go of it. You remain as the absolute. Is that true? And the one on the path of knowledge will say, yeah, that's what our teachers tell us. The teacher of bhakti says, but in the path of love, do you ever say that I love and adore the Lord, and finally the Lord has revealed himself to me? And so now that I have found the Lord, I can stop loving him? No. In the path of bhakti, it begins with love, it proceeds with love. In the end, when you find the Lord, love increases all the more. All the time as you walk on the path of love, love increases. There's never a time when you say, okay, I've done what I wanted to do. I'm enlightened. Let go of I can stop loving God and I've got other things to do in my list. I actually found this young man in our ashram in the Himalayas in India, who was from New York, and he was on a vacation. He was reading this high text of non-duality, Ashtavakra, sitting under a tree and reading. And then he looked very impatient and he said to me, Swami, I'm very worried. I still haven't attained enlightenment. I've been trying for the last 1 month, nearly 2 months now. I said to him that, well, it'll take a little more time than that. You should give it a little more time. You know, don't be impatient. And then he says, no, you don't understand. I've got a break from my job for 2 months, so I have to attain enlightenment and go. So I have to attain enlightenment and go back to my job in Wall Street. That's not how it works. All of that, in fact, the way spirituality is understood in Vedanta, it's not a part-time occupation. Spirituality is what all of life is about. Aurobindo, a great philosopher, saint of India, he put it very beautifully. He said that all life is yoga. All life is yoga. Do it consciously, you're a spiritual seeker. If you're not doing it consciously, you're just living life. It's the same thing. Life is not the whole set out of which one element is spirituality. No, spirituality and life are one and the same thing. Do it consciously, you know that you're a spiritual seeker. Otherwise, it's just what people call life. You are here because you are spiritual seekers. All the hundreds of thousands of people out there on the freeways in Santa Barbara, they're just living life. They're not here because they do not consciously think of themselves as spiritual seekers. So, bhakti, the teacher of bhakti says, and they're trying to sell bhakti to us, that after enlightenment also bhakti does not cease. Love of God does not cease. It keeps on increasing. It's even more at that point, because then God is really real for you after enlightenment. Bhakti has certain advantages. When you take up any text of Advaita, non-dual Vedanta, the path of knowledge, what happens is, when you first open it, the very first thing that you find are the preliminary qualifications. That's enough to turn off anybody. You are supposed to have clarity about the absolute. Brahman is the ultimate reality. The world is temporary, transient, impermanent. One. This is called viveka. Second, you're supposed to have utter dispassion and disregard for the world and a one-pointed seeking of the absolute. This is vairagya, dispassion for the world. Remember, all of this is to begin with before you actually start reading the book. You're supposed to have all of that before you enter the book. And then you've got to have 6 disciplines. Calmness and control of the mind. What does that mean? That I shall think only of my non-dual Vedanta, my inquiry into Brahman, and not anything else. I will not think about the world. That kind of calmness and control of the mind. Control of the sense organs, of all our body, our sense organs. There are discipline there. Then you have to have fortitude. All the troubles that the world throws at you, it should not shake you from the path of knowledge. And then you can already see it's pretty difficult. And then you're supposed to withdraw from the world of enjoyment. That taking enjoyment in a half a dozen different things, no. You got to turn off that internet and the phone and everything and concentrate and put your mind on the philosophical inquiry in the path of knowledge. And then a settledness. Instead of getting scattered back into the world, you settle down in your quest for realization. And a deep faith that though I do not get it yet, what the texts are telling me, they're true. I don't get it yet. I've got to get it ultimately, but right now I have this faith that what the texts are saying are true. And finally, an intense desire to be liberated. Intense desire to be liberated. Sri Ramakrishna says, if somebody catches hold of you and thrusts your head underwater and holds you there, and you are struggling, breathless. You're struggling, breathless, trying to get out. Imagine your intense desire to have one more gulp of air. In that way, one must yearn for liberation. And all of this before you start reading the book. Somebody compared knowledge, the path of knowledge, jnana, to the king who comes to visit you. So when the king comes to visit you, you must arrange. It's after all the king who's coming. Clean up your room and have your best furniture and your best crockery on display, and you dress up nicely. Everything must be nice and ready because the king is going to come. And what does the king do when he comes? Well, he comes in a lordly way and sits down and does not do anything much. You have to take care of the king. So jnana, the path of knowledge, is compared to the king. You have to be ready with all of these qualities. You have to be practically a saint before you start the path of knowledge. On the other hand, in contrast to this, bhakti, the path of love, is described as a humble maidservant. If you let her into your house, you don't have to do anything. She comes and cleans up. You see, when a love of God comes into the heart, all the virtues of spiritual life, they follow in its train. When love of God comes, you don't have to individually cultivate honesty and discipline and so on. Love of God will bring all of that. Bhakti is compared to an humble maidservant who comes and cleans up your room and decorates it nicely. She does everything that has to be done. Yes, we're selling bhakti today. How do we cultivate this love of God? Meditation is difficult. I mean, when you meditate, the two common complaints are, Swami, I fall asleep when I try to meditate. That's one complaint. The other complaint is, Swami, my mind thinks of so many different things. It's usually when I do not meditate, my mind is calm. But the moment I start meditating, my mind goes just about every which way. That's because when we are not meditating, we are actually not aware of what's there in the mind. The moment we calm down and look into the mind, we become aware of what's there in the mind. That's why the mind seems to be disturbed. But it's difficult. Meditation is difficult. The path of knowledge is difficult. The path of bhakti, how do I get love for God, if you ask? The teachers of the masters of bhakti, they tell us, it's actually very easy. It's very easy. You know what you have to do? All the things that you consider to be your own in the world, mine, when you use the word mine, my house, my wife or husband, my father or mother, my children and my grandchildren, my car, or whatever is mine, where you've got mine, just say to yourself, my God. Attach that in Sanskrit it's a very precise term, mamata, which means a sense of ownership. It's mine. Attach that to God. Don't begin with, I'm trying to love God, I feel love of God in my heart. It's artificial. Just say, my God. Automatically love comes there. A sense of closeness of ownership comes. Say, my Lord, thou art mine. Just add it. You don't have to give up anything. The path of knowledge will say, cut out everything else and then focus on this. Bhakti says nothing. You don't have to cut out anything. You have this whole list of mine. My car, my house, my dog. After that, you can add my God. Really, you can actually do that also. You don't have to just say my God. And a closeness develops between us and the Lord. And there's a very nice description of how bhakti operates, love of God operates. It's in Sanskrit, it's called Bhikshu Pada Prasarana Nyaya. Literally translates into the analogy of the holy beggar stretching his legs. Now, whatever does that mean? It means, in India, many of the beggars are actually, they are beggars, but they're also kind of sometimes men of God. They roam around and they beg for food, and many of them are spiritual seekers. So he's called a bhikshu. In fact, in Buddhism, the term bhikshu means a monk. So these bhikshus, it means both a beggar, the one who begs for food, and also is a spiritual seeker. So this bhikshu, this holy beggar, comes to your house, and he says, I don't need anything. I just give me a spot, in a corner, anything will do. And you say, all right, just stay there. And he stays there, and then he says, just a little more room to stretch out my legs. You see, you have this in English. The story of, we have read about it, the story of the camel and the Arab the camel who pushed his nose into the tent. And then little by little, finally the one who was staying in the tent was pushed out of the tent because the camel occupied the whole tent. But this is a similar thing, but in a good way, in a nice way. So the bhikshu says, let me stretch out my legs. And oh, is there a clock here? I can't see the clock. Do you have a watch or something? Just reminded. Yeah. No, that's okay. That's all right. I've got my thing. He's getting it. All right. So the idea is the bhikshu wants to stretch out his legs and takes a little more room. The next thing the bhikshu says, well, I have the Lord here, my Rama or my Krishna or Shiva. Yes, thank you. And I need a corner for the Lord, because often these wandering monks will carry a small image or also holy relic with them. So I need a corner for the Lord. So one more corner. And now, of course, the Lord has to be given offerings. So a part of your kitchen has to be given for, you can't just cook with everybody else. It has to be cooked specially for the Lord. So you need a part of your kitchen. And of course, the flowers in your garden have to be offered to the Lord. What happens is, slowly the Lord takes over your life. And it's a good thing. Bhakti has this way, love has this way of taking over your life. It's called Bhikshupada Prasarana Nyaya, the analogy of the holy beggar stretching out his legs. It's a beautiful thing actually to see how God slowly spreads over all your life, all your actions, and takes it over.
And now we have Muji.
There are many pains we carry, and you inherit it in the world. And not necessarily because you've done anything wrong. Each one must have a certain thing to carry, a certain weight, something that will help you to dig deep, to find and to wake up your discerning power. We need some friction for that. And life provides that for you, for your own growth. Actually, it is a form of love. But we were too immature to appreciate that or to see it. Everything that comes in your life has been served by love, even painful things, that you may grow, that you may transcend. The minute you begin to say thank you for them, then you are released from them. You have no natural enemy in the universe except your own thinking. You must transcend the dark ways of the mind. And to transcend without cynicism, you must not lose your gratitude and your appreciation. And thank God for everything. There further still you can go. And you're invited there to a place. Yes. Sometimes I say, I would like to take you beyond heaven, strange as it may seem, to a place that's so pure within your own self. But as long as that loyalty to identity persists within, we will fight against your total freedom. Yes. A great love and a great grace brought you here and enabled you to stay here. Some people came, and so strong is the resistance of the shadows in your life that you could not stay. They have to leave for a while. But you're here. And this should be your joy also. This is your joy also. To go beneath the surface of the being, beyond the person, into the realm of being, that you may come fully into life. To not be so concerned about how to live, but to discover that you are life, and at the same time you are the weakness of life. Don't lose that gratitude inside your heart. Be grateful even for the senses, for even your ability to think and to discern. All this is God's gift. And when you have imbibed enough, then you're ready to go beyond duality. Duality is not a crime, it is not a mistake. It is a necessary instrument of the Supreme in order to make experiencing possible, because there cannot be experience without duality. But you must use experience to go to the very root of experience, to the source. For a very long time it was fed to us that is a blasphemous to look beyond all the pictures that life put in front of you and to begin to experience a pictureless and imageless truth. But those limitations were the concoctions of the human mind. It is not banned by the divine. Your openness to the truth releases much grace inside your heart, and you will begin to now feel more powerfully its effect in you. You will discover the power of being more than the power of doing. The life force does everything. With consciousness, it shapes the world of experiencing. But you can go further, deeper. Without going 1 inch away from where you sit, you can come to the very source of all this. It has already begun in you. Sometimes now, some power that seem to work to betray this opportunity of total freedom may get stirred up, and for a while you may find that you'll feel like you're under some attack by some dark energies. They too must eventually go or become weak. And the best way is not to fight with them, but to hold on to the truth which is already with you, and to trust also. Don't get pulled into any shape. Don't enter into any fight with your mind or suppress anything. Simply stay as the undivided seer, simply just witnessing, but not combining yourself with anything that you see. And you see these things too will pass. Everything passes. Everything passes but you. Even your personality will pass. Your ideas about yourself, they also pass. We have lived many ideas about ourselves that we have exhausted and they've gone. It's a field of unending changes. But there is that which is unchanging within you. It is your seeing place. Get to know it. And as you begin to feel increasingly the spaciousness, the sense of emptiness, or a kind of neutrality of being, don't panic. Just be there. Just be there. Move in that. It's a great freedom. It's a great freeing up. It is unburdened of the usual weight that we carry as a person. You will learn and come to know without studying, simply by paying attention to your being, to the sense of being. The mind might say, but how can you learn without study? How naive an advice. But follow it. This is a tree that bears immediate fruit. Follow it.
And now we will listen to Nomi. His talk is Purnam, perfect fullness.
Undifferentiated being is who you are. That alone exists, and that alone is real. All spiritual practice is simply for the purpose of this non-dual realization. Know this undifferentiated being to alone be your nature, and all is perfect. There is a verse associated with the Upanishads, perhaps familiar to many of you. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudashyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishate. Purnamada Purnamidam, that is perfectly full. This is perfectly full. The emphasis is not so much on this as differentiated from that, the manifest from the unmanifest, all of this from the reality. The emphasis in the verse is on the perfect fullness of Purnam. That is the perfect fullness. The perfect fullness is that. What may be referred to as this is the same perfect fullness. The singular, perfectly full Brahman, which is our real self, is invariable. It is immutable. Hence its perfect fullness. The verse could end just with the first words. That is perfectly full. But the rest of the verse is for purposes of explanation, so that the fullness of that perfect fullness is fully realized. What is known as this is only that. What seems to be one's experience is actually only the self, which is the perfect fullness. Being, which can neither be born nor be destroyed, which does not increase and does not decrease, but remains its undifferentiated self. From the perfect fullness arises or comes forth. Again, the emphasis is not so much on something has come forth, but on the ever-existent perfect fullness. There is nothing else to constitute anyone or anything, anywhere. What is this perfect fullness? The unborn, imperishable existence. If or when that perfect fullness comes from what? From or of the perfect fullness. The perfect fullness alone remains. Before anything is created, there is this perfect fullness. When anything is created or imagined, there is the perfect fullness. After the dissolution of such, there is the perfect fullness. Before the beginning, after the end, all through, you are that perfect fullness, the infinite, eternal Brahman. That is the real being, undifferentiated. You are not a being of this that has come forth. But if you imagine yourself to be a this that has come forth, and you inquire, as the Maharshi instructs, who am I? The thisness, the limitation, the objectivity will be negated as a mere illusion, being entirely unreal. And all that remains is that which is the ever-existent, the perfect fullness of undifferentiated being. The verse is usually concluded with Om Shanti Shanti Shanti, to indicate the superlative peace of this utterly non-dual realization, the perfect fullness which is indestructible. That is, the innate, undifferentiated existence of your own self. Inquire to know yourself, and thus realize what the sages throughout all time have been proclaiming to be the truth. Then you yourself are the peace that you experience.
Now we will take a few minutes and meditate, inquire. Breathe in and breathe out. Notice the breath as it comes in, as it goes out. Take long, slow breaths. Notice in the pause between breaths where an ancient text says, one small self vanishes. Now, just notice that you exist. You exist, and you know that you exist. And inquire, investigate within yourself. Are you the doer of action, or are you the awareness that knows this action? Are you the witness of the action, or the one who seems to act? If you're not the body, then Who is acting? You are the unknown knower of all that is known. Who is this? Who am I? All right. We'll close with a short chant. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. Peace, peace, peace. Thank you for watching today. If that satsang was of interest to you, I have more, a free book site, a YouTube site, and my blog. The URLs will be on the screen next. These satsangs will continue in the following weeks with this series based on the Ramana Maharshi book, Who Am I? Thank you for letting me share this teaching with you.